Even if you've never visited, you've probably seen the sign for Mastodon State Historic site, south of St. Louis along I-55. We went a few years ago. Some of the museum staff has changed since then, but the story's the same. And this place is relevant to that ongoing debate about the extinctions. What makes this spot so important is not really what you can see, but what is under your feet, and what was found here when people did a little digging. This is the museum at Mastodon State Historic site, and that is the skeleton of a mastodon, a replica of bones that were found right here, remains of a creature that roamed these parts back in the Ice Age. But I guess one of the questions you must always get is what's the difference between a mastodon and a mammoth?
Absolutely. A lot more people are familiar with the mammoth. The mastodon is shorter. It lived in a different habitat, a woodland instead of a grassland, so its teeth are different.
They're related, but not maybe as closely as we think they might be.
Right,
yeah.
Right. They're a little bit more like cousins. There's mammoth family in a mastodon lineage.
This is no recent discovery. The bones were dug up 170 years ago by a man named Albert Koch. He'd heard about this spot at the base of a bluff where old bones had been seen, now known as the Kimmswick Bone Bed. He dug up the skeleton, reassembled the bones, and they became a major attraction at his museum in Frontier, St. Louis. A mammoth or mastodon, the newspaper announcement said. But a few years later, when he took the bones on tour, Koch was calling his skeleton a Missourium. He either thought he had found a new species or he was just promoting it that way. Either way, he didn't have it quite right. Some of the bones were in the wrong spots, and there were a few extras that didn't belong at all.
You got it wrong, I guess, right?
Right, right. He called it the Missouri Leviathan and said, come and see it. When he took it over to Europe to tour there, the scientists over there said, that's a mastodon, and they reassembled it, and it's still on display in London. It's south-facing.
More extensive digging took place in the first years of the 20th century by a man named C.W. Beeler, and his workshop became a museum. There were still lots of bones here. This was probably a gathering place for mastodons, maybe a watering hole. Like modern elephants, they lived in groups. It was also a place where scientists thought early humans came to hunt them, but at the time that was just an educated guess. And then there was a major discovery. And to get that story, in fact to get the story of why this museum is here in the first place, well, we have to go from Ice Age hunting grounds to modern-day suburbia. So you're still involved, yeah? Did you have any idea it was going to turn out like this?
No. In fact, I didn't even know what a mastodon was or the Kimmswick Bone Bed when we first heard about it.
Marilyn King is something of a history maker. Her scrapbook tells the story of how a group of citizens got together to save a piece of ground. They didn't know how important it was, they just felt that it should be saved.
And
now, were you one of these activist women, or were you out?
No.
Are you marching with signs and saving trees or anything like that?
No, not at that time. I was just involved in the Scouts with my boys and just a normal housewife, you know. And so
it was the 1970s. Interstate 55 had been completed, and the Transportation Department was selling off adjacent land it didn't need anymore. It included the Kimmswick Bone Bed, which local citizens wanted to be a park. But a developer bought the land at auction, and the park proponents decided to go to Jefferson City to fight the sale. That's when Marilyn King really started getting involved.
I actually ordered the bus because I spoke up at the meeting and said, I think we need a bus and more people can go. And he said, well, how about you getting a bus?
The grassroots pressure paid off. The state agreed to delay the sale for 18 months to give the citizens a chance to come up with $578,000.
Oh, we didn't think we were ever going to raise that much money at that time.
Even after a federal grant and a state appropriation, they were $100,000 short of the purchase price.
We're never going to make this.
Still, they kept at it, getting private and corporate pledges, and they held fundraisers, bake sales. There were donations from school children. And finally, they did it. raised enough money to buy the land and save the park. And soon they found out they had saved a whole lot more.
We didn't know it at the time, but Russell Graham, Dr. Russell Graham, we hired him to come over and do a dig, and a Clovis point was embedded in the Mastodon bone. It's a historic find.
There it was, the first hard evidence that the educated guess was right. Humans from the Clovis culture, the first people to come to North America, and mastodons really did live here together.
This small one here is actually the one that they found first. And that put us on the map as far as the first association between mastodon and these earliest people. There was a lot of the scientific community that didn't think that there was much left in this bone bed and wasn't really maybe worth saving.
The discovery was so important that the state park became a state historic site. And today, where there might have been a strip mall or a parking lot, there is a park for picnics or for a hike down the stairs to the Kimswick bone bed. And a museum to tell the story of Ice Age Missouri, the mastodons and the people, and another long extinct inhabitant of this region, the giant, and I mean giant, ground sloth, a plant eater as big as a bear.
And they died out at some point
Same time period,
reason.
10,000 years ago. A lot of these large animals called megafauna became extinct.
There's a lot to learn here, and that's why a lot of school groups come here. There's an education center where kids can learn and play, and that's where you will sometimes find Marilyn King. Of the 4 women who led the crusade to save the park, she's the only one still alive, still on the committee, and volunteering.
The bone was embedded in the Mastodon.
When it all started, they had no idea there would one day be a museum that draws 40,000 visitors a year. And the park they wanted? Well, count those visitors, and you're up to 800,000 people a year. Of course, this has been a popular spot for a very, very long time.